Hi there! Welcome to Cook Local, Eat Local, the podcast where you can find inspiration, tips, and recipes for enjoying more local food and drink. I am David Crowley, your host. Today, we'll be talking with AnnaBelle from Seasonal Eats. Her journey with seasonal eating began over 2 decades ago when a coworker introduced her to a local CSA program. Since then, she has connected with dozens of local farmers and mastered the art of preserving summer's abundance for winter meals. Through her Seasonal Eats website, AnnaBelle helps busy parents transform their approach to family meals. I look forward to sharing this conversation and gleaning her practical tips for healthy seasonal eating in 2025. Good morning. Welcome to the podcast.
Good morning.
All right. Looking forward to this conversation. We are recording right before New Year's, but we're planning to release it early in the new year when people are likely to have some resolutions and good intentions. And I think our conversation today hopefully will set people up for success who want to eat healthy and lean into seasonal eating. But before we do that, I always, especially when we're going to get into healthy eating topics, I like to start with, reminding people this healthy eating can still entail some very delicious food. So can you start just by whetting our appetites and telling us something yummy that you've eaten lately?
Oh gosh, and being it was the holiday season, there's so many good
Right.
food and meals and everything. However, with what the topic is and how I'm focusing on seasonal eating, I'm gonna go with my lentil chili.
Ooh.
So yes, it is one of my favorites. I make it throughout the year, and that's part of what I do. It's with my seasonal produce of bell peppers, all colors, whatever's in season, onions, garlic, corn, tomatoes, tomato sauce, cilantro. And being I'm a pescatarian, I do not put meat in my chili anymore, but I
Yeah.
found that lentils give that texture
Mm.
that those meat eaters want. So even my partner, who is a big meat eater, he loves this chili. So I make it fresh in the summer and I freeze for the winter, and I will make it in the winter with my frozen sauteed vegetables.
Oh, that sounds delicious. I was making a lentil chili that was had like North African spices in it. It was delicious, but it was vegan, but it was very sad. It was a blogger whose recipe I found and had linked to on some things I had done. And no, I don't think she's maintaining her site anymore, so I don't have the recipe. So I'm gonna have to maybe if you have your recipe, give it a try because I agree,
Yes.
lentil chili is definitely a good option. I do eat some meat. We do have a 19-year-old son in the house that, he would just, if he weren't here, would be eating probably mostly vegetarian, but he hasn't quite leaned into that yet. So we have meat in the
Yes.
mix, but I do love a good vegetarian meal like that. So I'd love to check it out.
Yeah.
But let's rewind a bit here and
Yeah.
get into your background. How did you get interested in cooking to start with? Are you a longtime cook, or is this a newer
Oh
found passion?
gosh, it is not a new passion. I grew up with my mom and my grandma making home cooked meals. When I look back, we didn't eat out a lot, and I know that cooking, but it just was ingrained in me, right? Like I didn't think anything of it. Um, I just thought, my mom growing up, she had these gardens in the back, and then she had a fruit cellar. So she would save
Mm,
some of that's what we do in Minnesota, right? Like to
yeah.
save some of our potatoes and carrots and onions. Um, if you don't use them up right away, you put them in sand in the fruit cellar in a cool place.
And
So
sand.
she would do that in sand. That's what she had.
Really,
I don't do this,
I've heard
but
of like fruit or root cellars is what they often will call them in New England, but I haven't heard of that,
mhm.
putting them in
Yeah,
sand. Okay.
I know. That's what she did. So, but yeah, so I've grown up cooking. Now she has a garden out back, and she actually here in Minnesota has these cherry tomatoes that reseed themselves every year,
Oh,
and they are
nice.
amazing. So she cooks. But so I grew up like that, went to college. I didn't cook a lot, and I did work for a local place that didn't fry any food. It was a cafe, and they made their own sourdough bread, salads and soups, and that's what they served. And so I kind of just always have eaten fresh foods. But then after I graduated from college, I moved to Minneapolis, and before I found a place, I lived with my aunt. And she is a wonderful cook. I always get great recipes from her. She's always like talking about food, cooking food, all everything. And then I found a place just I don't know, a mile from her house, and she'd say, "Hey, Anna, I'm cleaning out my fridge. Do you want to come over?" Of course,
Oh,
I'll
wow.
come over. Yeah. And then, I asked actually my mom and my sisters about what their first memories of farmers markets are. And we didn't really have, like, nothing came to mind.
Hmm.
However, I remember when I moved to Minneapolis, early 2000s, my aunt took me to the Minneapolis Farmers Market. And it was just a memorable trip because it was one of her favorite places. And she just showed me all the local food. I mean, there's cheese and beef and pork. And I mean, Minnesota, we have a great agriculture here.
Yeah.
Lots of local farmers cooking produce that we humans can eat that aren't necessarily for the cows, which is really
Right.
nice. And then that was, I just grew from there and started doing that. And I think that's where my love started. And
Oh,
then,
yeah.
and I think 2004 is I was working at this place. It was south of the Twin Cities area, and my coworker's like, "Hey, there's this farmer who's gonna bring produce right to our door.
Huh.
We don't have
Wow.
to go to the grocery store. It's called a CSA." I'm like, "What is a CSA? I have no idea what a CSA is."
Yeah.
And from there, I just learned about fresh produce, even more produce that our local farmers are growing that, I can still go to the farmers market and get more food, but I can get this food that I can just take home and cook. And, that's where that like spark of adventure of cooking seasonal produce really started was when
Yeah.
I started with the CS. And I've been part of a CSA ever since. Different farmers have come and gone,
Hmm.
like they started CSA and they just couldn't keep it up. And when I was working there, I found another place that is wonderful where we go to the farm, pick it up because they were right outside the town,
Perfect.
and they were wonderful. And then I moved back home to my hometown here, and I found a couple CSAs on and off. And then all of a sudden, where I was working, one of our local IT guys was like, "Oh, I have this farm. I'm going to do a CSA." And so I started this, and I want to say it's been 10 years since I've been with him. And then he went off on his own, and he and his wife do this farm, and they, just all of this.
Wow. So you've
Like,
got
that was
deep
a lot.
roots in this stuff. Yeah. Very good.
I do, thinking about it, I do. Yeah.
That's great. So we'll have to dig more into some of all that knowledge you've developed as a result. Let's start as going back to what I said in opening up the conversation. We're talking close to the new year, or right as we turn to 2025. People are thinking about being healthy. How does this focus on seasonality that you're so passionate about? What can talk about how that links to healthy eating goals?
Yeah. Healthy eating goals. They just the peak season, it's kind of like, where do I start? There's so many great goals with eating, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I like to focus on lifestyle changes of what does seasonal eating mean? How do these healthy habits start? One of the things with peak season produce is you cut down on eating packaged food. You cut
Hmm.
back on eating food, those preservatives,
Right.
the canned food that has a ton of sodium. So I like to freeze. So in the winter, I'm not using the canned food that has all that sodium or even the refined sugars that show up in
Yep.
foods, right? Like doing pulling back and looking at those seasonal foods that you can cook in the summer, batch cook and freeze. I'm more of a
Yep.
freezer than a canner. I like to freeze my food.
Yep. It seems a little
Um,
simpler, frankly, but
yeah, yeah. I think so, but
yeah.
I know people who can all the time. I have a friend, she has a huge pantry of canned stuff,
Yeah.
but I definitely freeze more. Um, and then what I have found, and just for me over these 2 decades of eating local foods and learning about the nutrition and that peak season flavor,
Yeah.
and then the nutrition that you get from those peak season vegetables and
Hmm.
fruits and the vitamins and the minerals and everything that comes naturally. It's just clearly I'm passionate about it.
Yes. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's very, yeah, definitely that health factor. And implicit in what you're saying, of course, those also, some great environmental benefits. So whether it's for your own health or the planet's health, it's got a lot going on with the more you can do the seasonality without the packaging and without the sodium. But
Right.
as we were saying, we're both from northern climates where I
Mhm.
was, as I mentioned to you before we hit record, I connect with bloggers who are in places like Southern California. Seasonal eating's pretty, they're growing stuff year round, all kinds of fresh produce. If you're in Minnesota or the Boston area, as I am, it's a little more challenging. How are you finding? You mentioned freezing, but are there other ways in a place like Minnesota that you're able to continue with seasonal eating through these winter months?
Yes, we are actually fortunate enough that we have a winter farmers market as
Okay.
well. And when you think about that, you think like potatoes,
Hmm.
carrots, beets, right? No, like the farm that I have the CSA with, they actually do a hoop house, so they grow those lettuces
Okay.
and
Yeah.
sprouts and all of that I can get. Now, I don't know, in January and February, it kind of tapers off because it
Yeah.
gets so cold that they can't keep that up. But, doing that, one of the things that I have done because I am a family of three, so I get like a full share that's supposed to feed a family of four or five.
Yeah.
I find I have an overabundance in the summer of this food.
Right.
And, I don't want to waste. I don't like to waste food. If I cook a recipe that I don't like, I'll eat it
Yeah.
because I don't want to waste it. I don't
Yeah.
make my family eat it. I just eat it. Um, but I will plan for doing a batch cooking, whether that be like the chili I mentioned, batch cooking a chili, making two batches of that, knowing it's pepper season with onions and garlic, corn, and everything. I'll batch that and freeze in single servings that I can just pull out and microwave or
Oh, yeah.
just throw in a
Nice.
pan. Or what I also do is I have found I don't always have the freezer space to make the full meal, so I will batch cook and saute up the vegetables.
Oh, okay.
So I'll saute up the the onions, garlic, and peppers together and batch and freeze that
Hmm.
as that for a one recipe
Oh,
of
okay. That's
to cook it
interesting.
in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
winter. So, and I'll even, sorry, I have a little
Oh,
why.
okay. Gotcha.
Um, I will um like the tomatoes, I just
Hmm.
freeze tomatoes as is, and then when they defrost, the skin comes right off. And
Oh,
so I
okay.
throw that in. And so,
You don't
yeah,
cook those into a sauce first. You just freeze the tomato. Because I've heard of more people making a sauce or something with the tomatoes to save them. Yeah.
sometimes I make a sauce.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't have time as
Sure.
a busy mom,
Right.
working
Right.
full time. So I have found those ways of just freezing, my tips and tricks of what I've done that's been great and what's failed. Like I've tried freezing potatoes. Nope, I
No.
won't do that.
Right.
I would rather cook them into something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for tomatoes, I would sometimes make sauces and sometimes just freeze them as is. Corn is another one that you can just take off the stalk and freeze as is, and it's so sweet and yummy and great with that peak season. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds great. Um, to switch, going back to something you were talking about, you talked about the CSA and connecting with different local farmers, including one that sounds like was a coworker at one point with you, which is cool. Um, can you elaborate a little bit on, obviously it's a great way to get a great produce, but I think I was reading, I forget if it was on your website or something you posted on Instagram, but something, it was clearly you were placing some value in that relationship as well as,
Mm.
it just being a transactional thing for the good food. So I don't know, like, how do you see that piece of it playing in as being important?
Oh, that's a really good question. Because those farmers, they have that passion for growing those
Yeah,
vegetables, right? Like that's why they're doing this, you know?
right.
They want to be able to support, yeah, so I think it was on my blog that I talked about this, but just meeting those farmers,
Yeah,
talking to them about their produce, and then they also have a passion for cooking their produce. So
yeah.
I've gotten some great recipes
Oh,
from
yeah.
the local farmers. Like so one of the fennel,
Yeah, yeah.
20 years ago, I didn't know what fennel was.
Right.
Garlic scapes. I had no idea what garlic scapes are, right? They're not the
Hmm.
normal produce you find in the grocery store. And so talking to the farmer, how they cook them. Back 20 years ago, there wasn't Pinterest
Yeah,
or
right.
this plethora of information on the internet. I went to my local library to search, right? But really the farmers making those connections. And then also when you connect with those farmers, you meet other farmers that, like the CSA I'm part of, the two of them do a great job connecting with other farmers.
Oh, nice.
So if you want another farmer that grows something different,
Hmm.
that's a really good way to do it. For example, the CSA I'm part of, he also connects with a farmer who has an apple orchard.
Yep.
So
Okay.
we have, I think, 7 to 10 weeks of apples if you want to purchase that as well.
Oh, nice.
And
Yeah.
then there's a flower farmer. So
Mm.
who doesn't love fresh flowers each week? So I get fresh flowers and it all comes with my one CSA, but yet I get to know these other farmers.
Yeah, that's great. It's
Yeah.
cool
And
to
then
hear how
here,
they network with each other like
yeah,
that. I don't know if I've heard that as
yeah,
much. You think that they're competitors, but in a sense, but especially if they're focusing on different crops, that's
right,
that's kind of cool.
right. Yeah,
So you've kind of had I mean, it sounds like you've had a growing, I mean, you started with, as you said, your mother's garden and, getting connected to a farmer's market and then a CSA. Where, for somebody who's kind of new to this, somebody who's just buying all their
yeah.
stuff at the grocery store, what would you suggest as a starting point if they want to make 2025 the year they're going to put their toe in the water of eating more local food?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that I don't think about because I've been doing this for
Yeah,
so long.
exactly. It's natural to you. You probably would be not doing it would be
Right,
more challenging for you, probably.
right, right. Yeah. So, however, when I travel, this is what I do. So, when I travel somewhere, I look for a local farmer's market. I look
Yeah,
for local farm to table. So, what I have found is I start with a farmer's market.
yeah.
So you find your local farmers market, and the internet is great, right? There's
Mm.
actually a USDA farmers market website
Oh, for
that if you
the whole,
put your,
cool.
yeah, yeah. So if you put your state in, it'll tell you what's out there. Um, the other thing is local state agriculture websites also have it, and maybe each state is different. I think here in the upper Midwest, we just have a lot of agriculture that's just natural for us. Another place is connecting with your city's Chamber of Commerce or the
Hmm.
Visitor Center
Yeah.
or local libraries are
Hmm.
great. Here in Minnesota, we have a thriving network of food co-ops.
Oh, cool.
And if you go into a food co-op or even some local grocery stores, if you live in a smaller community, will bring produce in from farmers. And
Hmm.
so you can connect with those places and ask about the farmers. Ask about, oh, I see this one's from Minnesota. Where did you get this one from? Or your local state,
Right.
or, whatever your local state is. And then you can kind of connect with those farmers and do that. Because again, the passion of seasonal eating is more than just eating those peak season
Right.
produce. It's saving on packaging,
Yeah.
all that packaging that goes to waste. It's saving on the shipping
Yeah.
from across the country to here because we have a lot of good produce. So thinking about that stuff, even so you think about healthy eating and you're what you want to do for 2025. I
Yep.
think another great thing is sustainability
Right.
and meeting those local farmers and thinking about that as well. But I don't want to overwhelm people either, right?
No,
Because I've been
that's
doing this so long. So
yeah, the farmers market starting there, and then, yeah, that's probably the best starting point. Is CSA definitely pushes the envelope because that definitely it's great. It's a great way for somebody to really challenge themselves. Um, I would just say it's cool to know that there's that USDA site, Massachusetts. Definitely, probably, we do have some great farms. It's probably less prominent in terms of our overall economy compared to Minnesota. So our
mhm,
state, there's a state agency does really work to lift up those, the farmers markets and the CSAs. So I know they have good resources. So it probably is pretty common, but it's nice to know there's a
yeah,
national site that people can
yeah.
turn to because I'm guessing there are probably some states where it's not as much of a
hmm
focus. So
And I
cool.
would say too that back 20 years ago, there weren't as many farmers doing this, and the CSAs were not as available as they are today, right? So I think
Right.
it's easier to find.
Yeah, definitely. Um, we've touched upon a little bit how planning is important for healthy
Mm,
eating, and I understand you have a guide available on your website. So maybe if you want
too.
to give us some other pointers on, how planning can set you up for healthy eating, and you don't have to give us all the information. You can tell us
Yeah.
what they can find if they download the guide that you have.
Yeah. Yeah. So my guide, I have it out there on my website. But it is a guide to planning nutritional meals for a busy family. Just my history of what I've done, and I want to get that out there to busy parents who don't know where to start and how to
Yeah.
start. So, one of the guides, one of the things, it's a 5-step guide. There's a lot, but I want to start with that because it's the basic of I want people to look at their favorite recipes, because it shouldn't be that like overwhelming of, oh my gosh, I gotta try these recipes. Is my family gonna like them? I don't want people to worry about that. Like start with your family's favorite recipes that
Yeah.
have fresh produce in it. Even if
Mhm.
used canned, what are those recipes that you use? And then from there, you make that list of those recipes and what's the produce that you use, what are the herbs, what are the pantry foods that you use, like the beans and the grains and the spices and the proteins. What are the
Yeah.
proteins your family uses? So even though I'm pescatarian, my daughter and my partner both love meat, so I cook meat for them. I'll
Oh,
just
okay. Yeah.
won't put meat in mine. So,
Yeah.
even that part. And then from there, map out your calendar, map out, when your busy times are. Like my daughter's in golf, when are her golf meets? Like I know that this is going to be busy time. She used to be in track, which is even more extensive.
Yeah.
Plan that out, put on your vacations. Like don't like you can still have vacations and still cook seasonal food. Um, and then map out when those vegetables are peak in your area.
Yeah.
And what I've found is most states or local areas have on their website when their produce is peak.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So I've linked to that too on my website. I think I have that linked, but I've linked different states to there too.
Yeah.
Um, and then commit to those shopping days and make it a family adventure. Like we go to the farmers market and we have breakfast. Like
Oh,
it's
that's a
breakfast
good
and
idea.
picking it up,
Fun.
and it's teaching our kids where our food comes from. So make it a
Yeah.
learning experience. So it's a morning of fun and meeting these farmers and talking to these farmers. Like I was talking about, you meet the
Yeah.
farmers and where they go. Um, and then you take those dates that you're going to batch cook where you buy extra tomatoes and
Hmm.
freeze or saute or roast. I love roasting. I have a great roasted tomato basil soup recipe that
Mm,
we make.
that sounds
It's
good.
wonderful. That's the way I cook my tomatoes too.
Yeah.
And then And then reevaluate monthly, like just take a day out of the month and say, hey, every first Monday, I'm going to look at my calendar and see what's at the market
Yeah.
and go from there because we know how here in Minnesota the weather changes.
Yeah. Right.
So the season changes and, you know, yeah.
Those are great tips, and I think some good ideas there. And download that resource
Hmm.
from your site to get more info.
Yeah.
Um, I guess
Yeah.
while we're at it, you want to give us, where to find you on the web and social media. We'll link to it in the show notes too, but for somebody who's uh, eager to hear it right now, give us where they can find that guide and the other information you've referenced.
Yeah. Well, Instagram is my go-to social media. I love Instagram for the reason of photos.
Yeah,
I
sure.
love I love taking food photos. All my photos are my own. And,
Yeah,
it's
right,
so much fun. But it's AnnaBelle underscore seasonal eats on Instagram.
right,
And that's AnnaBelle.
great.
And
Excellent.
then on there in my bio, I have linked to my blog, which is my seasonal eats blog, and also the 5-step guide on there as well. My website is as I was telling David before we started
Yeah,
recording, my website's a multi-use website because I'm
right.
also a designer and artist.
Yeah.
So it is actually AnnaBelleDesignAndTravel.com/blog is where I would send people to learn about my seasonal eats and my passion. Like this is my passion.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's very clearly coming across. Well, we've covered a lot of
yay!
great info, and we know now where they can get more. I guess to wrap up,
Mhm.
I don't know
Yeah.
if you have any other great tips for seasonal eating that you haven't shared, or if you want to, you could also end with that, or if you want to underscore something you've already said as a parting thought to wind up.
Yeah, I think, anyone listening to this who is new to it, I don't want them to get overwhelmed.
Yeah,
I want you just what I want to teach is starting with your own recipes and what you can get local. Let's start there. Let's start small. Let's build that up. Freezing is easy because you don't have to have a canning set and everything. You can freeze in containers you already have. Um, as a busy mom, I just know how it can be overwhelming. And let's just start small. Let's just start from the beginning and make it practical. I on my website, I do have contact information. Feel free to message me with any questions that you have to how to start. I'm happy to help. I love connecting with people. I love seasonal food, peak season
yes.
food that's sweet, right off the vine. Let's eat it all year long, especially here in our Midwest, upper Midwest winters.
Yeah, well, that's great. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's smart, in terms of, starting small with realistic goals. That's probably good for any resolution, the more complicated or or uh, ambitious you are, you're probably setting yourself up for some challenges and sticking to it. But if you keep it simple and also lean on resources, and that's
Yes.
great that you're offering yourself up. Both, people can check out your site, but I'm sure you might get a few messages taking you
Yeah.
up on that as well. Well, it's been a great conversation, and we look forward to sharing it with our audience.
Thank you, David. This has been great. I love talking food and seasonal produce.
Well, great. Well, have a happy and healthy New Year with plenty of good local food.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Cook Local, Eat Local. To get the show notes with links for recipes and resources we covered today, go to cooklocaleatlocal.com to get the podcast landing page. And please be sure to subscribe to Cook Local, Eat Local wherever you get your podcasts. Make it a great day with some tasty local food on your plate.